This is Tim from Striker, and you're listening to According Metal.
It's time for new metal album reviews.
That was Break Heresy from Cellador-Off of their new album, Off the Grid. Yes, 2017, new Cellador album. Now, if you don't know who Cellador is, shame on you. Go listen to their stuff, and especially after this review, you'll definitely want to check out their stuff. But I have history with these guys only because I go way back to when they had their debut album. This is their second album, by the way. Their second album. They came out in 2007 with Enter Deception. Here we are, 2017, and here we have Off the Grid. A decade in between two albums. Lots of stuff happened. You'll learn more later about that as far as why all of those things happened to the band. But here they are with a new album. 10 years later, though. Does it stack up? Does it sound like the Cellador you knew back then, if you did know who they were? Was it disappointing? Does it sound like an album that's been written years and years ago? Does it sound current? What does it sound like? Lots of thoughts going through my head, waiting in anticipation for this album to come out, because I got to tell you, when I first heard these guys 10 years ago, just very speedy, very speed metal, power metal-ish to me, super quick, trying to figure out what European country these guys are from, because clearly they're not from anywhere around here. Turns out they're from Nebraska, of all places, which really made me go, they're from Nebraska? They don't sound anything like an American band. They didn't then, they still don't now. And it's pretty amazing to see that these guys are still around, doing their thing. Chris Peterson, of course, is the main front man behind the band, does the vocals, and is the guy responsible for just, 180 beats per minute riffs. I mean, the guy just shreds beyond belief. But I'm a guy who has some history with Cellador. My co-partner here does not. So, Biv, what did you think of Off the Grid?
Well, first of all, you're right. I didn't have any history with them whatsoever, and you brought them to my attention. You said, listen, we got to review this. So, hats off to you for finding an act that I had no familiarity with. Second thing I will say is that after listening to them, I have to agree with your assessment, because I did listen to both CDs. I listened to all of their work from Enter Deception in 2006 all the way up through Off the Grid, which, by the way, I love the title Off the Grid. As you may know, if you know me, you know why.
Oh, yeah, that's right up your alley.
Oh, it is, totally. But I love Soul Survivors. I love Break Heresy. Shadowfold's awesome. Wake Up the Tyrant might be one of my favorite tracks on the entire CD.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Off the Grid rules. You can go on and on with this one. I mean, for me, they're original, they're fun, they're different, but yet they have a metal sound that you can kind of, acclimate to. Like, they're not that different, but yet they're so original all at the same time, which is hard to do. So I found their sound to really, I hate the word mature, because that kind of connotates like, oh, you've gotten older. But their sound really has matured. Don't get me wrong, Enter Deception was a good CD, but it was really raw, it was really young, it was really edgy. They kept the edginess on this one, but yet they also, at the same time, made it so that they took that rough, hardcore riff from song to song and really just drew you in all the way through. So for me, with the songs I already mentioned, plus This Means War and Running Riot, which ends up the CD, I just found it to be fun all the way through. And with our interview that we did with Chris, after understanding where he was coming from, and if you haven't listened to that, please go listen to it now. I gave this an 8 out of 10. I thought it was a great CD.
Yeah, well, give a couple thoughts track to track in regard to it. Soul Survivors is a great way to kick things off. And immediately when I hear Chris, and again, if you haven't got a chance to listen to the interview, listen to it, because there's some history there. Chris Peterson's not the original singer of the band. Michael Gremio was on Enter Deception. He left the band. Chris, after trying, just said, screw it, I'm going to be the vocalist. And he sounds a lot like, at least in my world, he has gotten himself to get a very James Paul Luna Holy Grail vocal type vibe from where Chris is now vocally, which is nothing bad at all. Sounds really good. And I'm like, man, this sounds like Holy Grail to me as far as vocally on song like Soul Survivors. Break Heresy, which we just played for you, is next track. Lots of melody, but faster than shit. And just a great song. One of my favorite songs on the album. The only other song that may be close to it that I really like is the title track, Off the Grid, which is just an outstanding song. And once again, you're just met with just this incredibly fast riff, but so much melody to it. And like we said in the interview with Chris before, and I agree that a lot of people kind of use a Dragon Force comparison, and I get it to some extent because it's frantic riffing all over the place. But there's so much more melody to what Cellador brings to it than what Dragon Force does, at least. Totally my 2 cents there. You listen to the songs, however, though, and this is if you want to see with a variation or some changes there, too, to where it's not just a one-trick pony. They're not just, like, super, super, super fast and that's all they do. Listen to, like, Swallow Your Pride, and for, like, the first 20 seconds, it's a very hard rock vibe until it goes flat out, speed metal. Just flat out speed metal. But for the first 20 seconds, you're like, wow, this sounds different. Oh, nope, there it goes. So, blast beats on that song. I mean, super quick. Killer solo on that song as well. And Good Enough is a track that also stands out for different reasons. Obviously, you're hearing it and you're going, well, this sounds way different. And then you get to the chorus and you go, oh, I know this song. Of course, that's a Cyndi Lauper cover, and it just reminds me of the Goonies credits as I'm listening to the song, and I'm going, oh, holy shit, I know this song. My only knock on it is, they have Good Enough as the 8th track on the album, and to me, that's almost like bonus material stuff. You know what I mean? Like, that could have been the last track on the album because it's kind of let's have fun. It's a Cyndi Lauper cover, and they do a hell of a job, and they metal it up quite a bit. But it's a Cyndi Lauper song, you know what I mean? So I don't know where it fits, and I guess what I mean by that is if you go back to the next track, This Means War, which Biv just talked about there, it reminds me a lot of Never Again off of Enter Deception, that like take an Iced Earth riff and speed it up times 2, and that's what this sounds like to me. And then it just, man, I'll tell you what, there's lots of melody, lots of variation, but yet if you like one song, you'll like the next one, and the next one, and the next one. It's not as if, whether you start all the way from Soul Survivors all the way to the end of Running Riot, there's not one song where you go, okay, next. My only possible knock is there's not a ton of variation there, because it's all fast. Almost all of it is. If you're expecting any breakdowns or any slow stuff or mid-tempo tracks, you ain't gonna find it. Good Enough is about as slow as you're going to get, and it's a Cyndi Lauper cover. Okay? That gives you any idea. But I will say this. I'm so glad that even though you had Honor Fourth, which is an EP they had in 2013, the reality is these guys have had 2 albums in 10 years. This also goes to show for all of the bands and for all of those who give up, and Chris easily could have done so. Many times and you hear his story. I'm telling you, go back and listen to the interviews because you'll get to see how many labels were going to sign him, but then they didn't, and then their manager left, so they lost this label deal, and maybe we should just go ourselves and do it. We've recorded this album, and holy shit, who's going to release it? It just goes to show when you dedicate yourself to your craft and you put in the time and you put in the work and you really want to make it work. And that's what's so great about doing the show we do, is to hear stories about those kind of bands. And I'm not saying this only because Chris is a good dude and I happen to be a fan, but I was a fan before I knew Chris. These guys are really good, and it's a damn shame that people don't consider these guys to be one of the better bands that are out there, especially in that speed metal, or as Chris called, melodic speed metal genre, because they're as good as they get. And, Chris has grown vocally night and day. Band sounds really tight together, and I'm really excited for what the future holds for Cellador. But for me, it's 8.5 out of 10 material. It's right up there with some of the better stuff I've heard all year. Great job.